ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Deadline. I'm your host, Poochie here, and I'm here with Miss Carolyn Whigham of Whigham's Funeral Home of Newark, New Jersey. She's the CEO, the president, and she's the boss lady. Put it to you like that there. Her father was Charles L. Whigham, who was a professional businessman, the first man in the city of Newark and among the first in the state of Jersey to have a mortuary parlor in the largest city in New Jersey. He was also the first and only in New Jersey and in Newark to be the president of it's called the City Bank.
City National Bank.
City National Bank. And I want the audience to give her a hand that she's here because she has a very, very busy schedule with the things that are going on. So we're going to go right into this here, and I'll give her the floor right now. We'll take it from there.
Good morning or good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity allowing me to sit here and talk to you that the citizens of Newark get to see a different side of me. Most times they see me on a funeral. On a funeral, I'm known that I don't talk, I don't laugh. It's a one-time event. And with that, I am doing something that is quite different than a birthday or an anniversary or a party. You got one time to do it. I can't go back and do it the next day or the next year. So it's good to be here. We're going to talk about various things. This young man is a dear, dear friend of mine. We don't cross paths often, but when we do, it's nothing but love.
Well, we're going to take it from there and say it like this here. You are a Viking. Unfortunately, I'm a weak Indian. You were among the first that went to Vailsburg. Was that during Vailsburg High School in Newark, New Jersey? Was that during the time where Vailsburg wanted to separate itself from Newark?
Absolutely. In 1962, it was published in the Star Ledger that there was open enrollment for students to attend Vailsburg High School. I did not want to go to Arts High because my brother went there and it was too close to home. I didn't want to go to Central because that's where my father went. I didn't want to go to Southside because that's where my mother went. I wanted to go to a different school. So the day of the open enrollment, my dad and I went up to Vailsburg. And as we walked up the stairs, there was a white woman sitting at the top, and as we approached the desk, she closed the book and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, the open enrollment is closed." Now bear in mind, I'm the only person of color walking up the stairs. The other children were white or Spanish. There was not a problem. So my dad said, "Well, it's 9:15 and open enrollment began at 9 a.m. How is it that you're filled already?" She said, "Well, we just had a lot of people." So my dad stood there for a moment. I'm like, I don't know what to do, what's going on. This is where I want to go to school. He says, as I approached driving up here, I saw a lot of vacant apartments and homes that were either for sale or possibly going through some renovations. He said, it would be a good idea perhaps that I bought like 4 or 5 of these properties and brought some children from the inner city and families to move into these homes. Therefore, they would be residents of this community. They would have to go to school here. The woman opened the book and said, "You know what? We have room for one." That's how I became enrolled in Vailsburg High School.
You are a Capricorn. Is that
Yes,
your
I am.
zodiac sign? And Capricorns, according to my research, speaks of your energeticness, your attention to detail, discipline, organization, and you have a very, very gigantic heart. But it takes a lot to get there.
Yes.
But once you're there, you're there.
Yes.
Just like when you're out, you're out. And the thing I want to speak of, being that your daddy's little girl,
Yes, I am.
is that your father, as of today, had a way about dealing with all type of situations in the aspect of not impulsive, but from a strategic perspective of SOPs, standard operational procedures, even in that
Right.
incident that you're speaking of. Now, after you got into the school, was there any difference of the relationships that you had? Did you see there was a difference of the Newark kids and the Vailsburg sector because that's what it was, a section, Week Wake section, Branchbrook Park section.
Right.
Was there a difference or just kids being kids?
Well, let me just say this. My classmates were the Atenesios, Imperiali's daughter was there. So you had political environment. I know the kids would say to me, "You're different than the other colored kids we met or we know." And I would say to them, "Why?" "Well, your hair, it's not greasy. It's always nicely done. You dress nice. You know how to talk. You know how to carry yourself." And I would say to them, "I'm no different than the others. It's the difference is they have not been exposed. They've not had the opportunity." Certain families, and listen, I don't come from a wealthy family. Let me clarify one thing. My father was on welfare until he was 17 years old. He was raised by my grandmother, who divorced my grandfather when my dad was 7 years old, from down in Sparta, Georgia, where my dad was born. And it was an abusive relationship that she and he had. So she traveled to Newark to raise 3 boys. My father had an older brother, my Uncle Al, and then he had a younger son, Uncle EJ. Uncle EJ was killed during the war. So my dad lost a brother at the age of 21 years old. So, when people say, Whigham, you think of rich, you think of... My father was welfare. But one thing my father said, I will never see my family on welfare. I will do whatever I need to do. And I think that was one of the true instruments that caused him to become an entrepreneur. My dad really wanted to be a doctor.
Really?
My dad's aspiration was to be a physician.
And when you speak of entrepreneurship, for those of you all of the 21st millennium, and even of the 20th century, my generation, which we are baby boomers, which we were the largest generation up until you all came. That's why you all are of such importance, because you all, when I say you all, this generation X and millennium and Y2K, you all are our greatest asset, or should I say greatest resource, because you have intelligence and everything else in front of you, whereas you and I had to go to the library.
That's right.
If you didn't pay the fine for returning the book, you could not
get any
books to continue your schooling.
That's right.
So understand and open your ears and understand that everything is at your immediate exposure. All you have to do is fine-tune it and use it for the right thing. Getting back to the entrepreneurship, how was Newark at that particular time really, far as employment? I've seen pictures. I'm a 60s baby, 1960, and I know of some of the tentative houses that were pretty much prevalent in the Central Ward,
Right.
which was considered the Third Ward, for you all that don't understand that. The Third Ward was primarily the largest populated, with the most, I don't want to say indentured servants, but most of them, if they had any type of work, they had to make shift work to make day-to-day necessities account. As far as putting food on the table, you might have had your neighborhood mechanic, you might have had your butcher,
Your blue
and you might have
collars.
had your painters of houses, whatever you had to do in order to make it. Now, the Week Wake section at that particular time was very, very pretty, spacious, and full of educators, doctors, architects, and things of that magnitude on that sector of town. The same that prevalent was on the north side of town, which was Branchbrook section. So if you notice, and you can follow me from a rhetoric perspective, I'm breaking down the system from what I know during my time in high school. And then you go to the Vailsburg sector, which was predominantly, as they said, which was German. We're going to say West Side Vailsburg sector, which was predominantly German and things like that there. And the Eastwood, which is on the other side of Penn Station, going back to the Caruso days.
That's right.
Caruso's was like a long strip like Coney Island, where you could get every and anything there. For those of you who don't know what Caruso's was, it's where the fire department has their training facility now. What was the difference in the sector of the Central Ward to the Valesburg section that you resided in?
Okay. Valesburg was typically German and Italian at that time. There were no African Americans that I knew of living in that area. Really? I used to catch the 13 and the bus 54 to and from school. It was typically, German and Italian. I do not recollect in the beginning when I first enrolled, which is in '62. Now, by the time I graduated in '66, it was influx with more African American families moving into that area. Now it is predominantly African families. So it's done a total change from white to African American, now to actually Africans. So the change in comparison to, let's say, King Boulevard, or as the old timers would know, High Street. If you rented an apartment, and that was the high-rise buildings, that was also the little bricks, not the old bricks now, the little bricks that started back on High Street.
On Belmont Avenue?
That's correct. Anything in that basic vicinity, you had it going on. High Street was known as the street where you had St. Michael's Hospital. Most people don't know that. St. Michael's was actually on High Street, now King Boulevard. You had Dr. Darden, who was there, African-American doctor. You had Dr. Haling, who was there, African-American doctor. You had Dr. Stokes, who was there. Then you had Dr. Shelton across from the funeral home.
Dentist.
That's right, the dentist. Then you had Louise Roundtree, which was actually Miss Scott. It wasn't Roundtree. Louise Scott, which was Kruger Building. But also to that, then you had the Coleman brothers, who had a hotel right directly next door to
32 Flavors.
That's correct. 32 Flavors was Mr.
32
Brookins.
Flavors.
I went to college with his daughter,
32
Louise Elaine
Flavors.
Brookins, which is the ice cream parlor now at 602 High Street.
That's across
right on the
street
corner.
From the church.
That's correct. Direct across the street from St. James.
And across from Kruger's.
That's correct.
Just down the street.
But
from
that
where
was
13,
all African American owned.
That's before 611
Absolutely.
Hill Manor was thought about.
That's right. Before even the construction. Even the construction.
Since we're running on that of King Boulevard, High Street,
Right.
let's go all the way down, because I'm going to do a segment later on the Riviera Hotel. Can you speak of the Riviera Hotel and I think
Father Divine.
Hopewell Church, which was a Jewish synagogue or
Synagogue,
something?
that's correct.
So can you bring that up to date for these young kids that live in this geographical area, but they only think that, what is that on Spruce Street, that big building there?
Well, they just renovated that building.
Yes. That they think that it's just about that. And believe me, young people that's in my studio audience, we're not badgering you. We're trying to enlighten you of the great town that you come from, that is a metropolis. And when I say metropolis, testing. Urban stands for testing. Urban, not Irvin. Urban stands for testing. And when you leave a urban Chicago, Detroit, New York area of urban, it's called urbancy, you are able to combat, compete, and everything else, because you've been seen and you've been exposed to it at an early age. Getting back to that there, how prevalent was the Riviera Hotel at that time? Was it for us?
The Riviera Hotel was Father Divine's hotel, and that's where all of his basically worshipers or people who followed him lived there. Now, my mother's mother, meaning my great-grandmother, she was a member of Father Divine.
For those who didn't know, Father Divine was a black minister. He was like a prophet, apostle.
He called himself a prophet.
And he came to help those that were underprivileged, regardless primarily of your ethnicity.